Further to the brief verbal notice that I gave to you, sir, and to the House yesterday, I rise at this time on a question of privilege flowing from the actions taken by the government of the Russian Federation. In the course of its aggression against Ukraine, Russia has purported to impose personal sanctions directed against certain specific Canadian citizens, 13 in total so far. They include Mr. Paul Grod, the distinguished national president of the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress, Wayne Waters, the clerk of the Privy Council, Jean-François Tremblay, deputy secretary to the cabinet, Christine Hogan, an advisor to the Prime Minister, a cabinet minister, the government House leader, 2 Liberal members of Parliament, the members for Mount Royal and Toronto Centre, a New Democrat MP, the member for Ottawa Centre, 3 government members, the members for Niagara West, Glanbrook, Selkirk Interlake and Etobicoke Centre, a senator, Ronel Andrechuk from Saskatchewan, and, Mr. Speaker, you, sir, the Speaker of the House of Commons. These sanctions are obviously intended to be insulting and intimidating. They are designed to interfere with the normal and proper behavior of the named individuals. Typically, those who have reacted so far to their being included on this Russian blacklist have worn their sanctioned status as a badge of honor for standing up for freedom, democracy, human rights, and the rule of law, for defending the independence, integrity, and sovereignty of Ukraine. And I am sure, Mr. Speaker, that all of us in this House endorse that principled Canadian attitude and reject the notion of these Russian sanctions. It is bad enough, Mr. Speaker, that such sanctions are directed against a prominent Canadian citizen like Mr. Grod. It is bad enough that they are directed against several professional public servants. It is bad enough that the Russians are purporting to sanction Canadian members of Parliament, to punish them, to interfere with their public and parliamentary duties, to seek to intimidate them in their defense of freedom and rights. All that is bad enough. But it's worse still, Mr. Speaker, that a foreign power has attempted to insult and demean the Parliament of Canada as a whole by purporting to sanction the Speaker of the House of Commons. The Speaker represents the rights and privileges of all MPs, regardless of partisanship or any other distinction, and through them, the Speaker represents the basic values of our democratic way of life. The Speaker reflects the fundamental dignity of the House of Commons. Sanctions by a foreign power against the Speaker of the House of Commons are a fundamental affront to Canada. They are, in my view, an unmistakable attempt, unmistakable contempt of Parliament, and they should not go without a response. I won't belabor the point, Mr. Speaker. I believe it speaks quite eloquently for itself. I would simply refer to one short paragraph on page 82 of the second edition of O'Brien and Bosk. It reads as follows, quote, "Any disregard of or attacks on the rights, powers, and immunities of the House and its members, either by an outside person or body or by a member of the House, is referred to as a breach of privilege and is punishable by the House. There are, however, other affronts against the dignity and authority of Parliament which may not fall within one of the specifically defined privileges. Thus, the House also claims the right to punish as a contempt any action which, though not a breach of a specific privilege, tends to obstruct or impede the House in the performance of its functions, obstructs or impedes any member or officer of the House in the discharge of their duties, or is an offence against the authority or dignity of the House." End of quote. Mr. Speaker, I believe a sufficient prima facie case of contempt exists in the circumstances of these Russian sanctions. And if the Chair so finds, I would be prepared to present a motion which, in summary, would first reiterate the clear support of this House for freedom, democracy, human rights, and the rule of law in Ukraine, and the independence, integrity, and sovereignty of Ukraine. Secondly, express our united condemnation of the behavior of the Russian Federation in relation to Ukraine and our rejection of Russian sanctions against Canadians. And third, call upon the appropriate committee of this House to investigate the full meaning and consequences of a foreign power showing contempt against the Speaker of the House of Commons and the Parliament of Canada. Or, Mr. Speaker, in the alternative, given what I think is a pretty strong common view in the House around these points, I would be happy to see the House leaders convene to discuss an appropriate all-party motion on this matter of contempt to deal with what is, I think, an unprecedented situation and give some guidance to how we can and should respond as a Parliament in cases of foreign contempt. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.